today, and we look forward to having it. We're getting too close together. An educational and honest conversation about behavioral health in the state of Alabama. At the Community Foundation, our mental health initiative is focused kind of on two major approaches. Very much the focus is on children and adolescents and trying to find the best school-based programming, the best way to address trauma training, and making a difference in the children's lives and their families. And then the second approach is to make systems changes best that we can, break down barriers to care, work on insurance reimbursement, trying to address the gap in providers and services. So that's kind of what guides our approach in mental health. So today we have already been introduced panelists. I would encourage you to look at your written materials because there is more information and more detail in the written materials. So just as Ryan mentioned, we will start with a few questions designated to each of the panelists. They will have a brief answer period, and then we will turn it over to your questions, which we hope you will participate in. So, are y'all ready? Okay. We will start with Dr. Shields, and we will start by asking, what is your most important contribution to mental health improvement in our state?
I would say first and foremost that it is important, that we have established it as a priority. We know that, just as Commissioner Boswell was speaking, we know one adult in front of a child of trauma can change the trajectory of that child's life. And we can't always change what they're going through, but we know we can help them through it. So I would first say that we've said this is important. And to be able to have mental health coordinators in all of our districts, we've got over 150, and they do that not alone. They do that in concert with our school counselors. They do that in concert with our Office of Student Learning and our Office of School Improvement. They do that with our work with the multi-tiered systems of support, because we know if we really want to create, as we often say in my office, a tapestry of support, we want to make sure that we're doing it in concert with one another so that we're all in these wonderful initiatives and these wonderful spaces that have wonderful hearts to change trajectories and outcomes for students, that we're not playing whack-a-mole, you know, that we are talking with one another. We coordinate with the Department of Mental Health, Department of Human Resources, Department of Early Childhood. I was just talking to Gayla a moment ago. I said, are we missing a meeting? Our office connects with them monthly to calibrate our work across the state. So what are you doing? How can we come in and be gap standards for children? Where are the places we need to push in? Where are the places we need to pull out?
That's awesome. I know we've worked a little bit on training the school district mental health coordinators because some of them were kind of thrown into a position. Absolutely. They weren't really sure what they were doing, where the funding was going to continue, but I think that that's been very much worked on over the last couple of years, and they've become very effective.
The youth mental health first aid has been instrumental, not just, of course, with our mental health coordinators, but we're making sure that leaders and teachers across the state have access to the same training.
That's great. Jeremy, it's your turn. I'll ask you the same question.
Well, I think to back up just a little bit, to give almost like a mini history lesson, you know, the Community Mental Health Act was enacted in 1963 and by JFK. Sadly, less than 30 days later, he was assassinated. And so funding never followed that act, really. And then in 1980, there was another push, and it passed. And then in 81, through budget reconciliation process, it was taken away. And then in 2014, Excellence in Mental Health Act created CCBHC, which the commissioner talked about. And then in 2017, the first 8 states joined. So really, essentially, for 50 years, community mental health has been in the wilderness trying to survive. And in 2017 or 14, that really changed. 2024, when Alabama joined the CCBHC initiative, and really, I guess, also in 2020, when our crisis initiative started, is really when we have been able to get out of surviving and really be able to perform at our best. And so for the first 20 years of my 25-year career, we simply have been surviving. I mean, the speaker talked about the cuts, and that's really, we've just been trying to make it month to month, year to year, making sure we made payroll and all of those types of things. I can say without a doubt the last 4 years have been the most rewarding of my career. And it's because of the crisis initiative as well as now CCBHC. And the reason for that is before that point, we were a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 operation for the most part. We had some residential, we had some other things. But when somebody called after those hours, we had to refer them elsewhere because we didn't have the resources. Now in 4 years for Wellstone, we have started 2 crisis centers, 1 adult, 1 pediatric, and 4 mobile crisis teams, 2 adult, 2 pediatric. And it has been an absolute game changer in terms of what we are able to do, how we're able to intervene, the results that it is producing that I'll talk about at some point, hopefully today. It has really changed community mental health in so many ways. And, you know, I'm really excited about the future. We've only been doing CCBHC for 6 months, and the results, you know, the commissioner talked about wait time. That's always a gripe. I remember when I came to Wellstone in 2011, our wait time for services for a psychiatric appointment for a doctor was 6 months. Today, 6 months after CCBHC started, I can say we have same-day access. So, because when people are in a crisis or people need an appointment, if you don't get to them when that is happening, you're missing a golden opportunity. And so now that we have that capability, it really is changing how we address mental health crises in Alabama.
That's a big impact contribution that y'all are making.
Well, and that's not me. I mean, that is, you know, I stand up on the stage, but we have 600 employees that are day in and day out are in the trenches, that are boots on the ground. They're the ones that are doing the work. They're the ones that have the stories to tell of the interventions and the people and the lives that they're changing. It's really amazing work in what we're able to do.
Well, there's no doubt that integrating primary health care with mental health services solves a lot of the challenges that we face in our state on all sorts of levels. Representative Warren, we know that you are a huge mental health advocate and education background, as well as serving in the House of Representatives.
Would you ask your question again? I want to make sure.
Sure. What would you consider your most impactful contribution to improving mental health in our state?
Okay, I think I'm probably different from anybody in this room. Not knowing what I know now, my love of my life has his family has the history of mental illness. I have 4 in-laws that are under care. I have 2 nephews, and I have a daughter. That hit home so to me until I had to, you know, you had to really search for some answers or some finding or some support. And if Don, I don't know whether Don Schofield's here or not, but I think we call him more than anything. And my husband served as the sheriff for 20 years. So we had to get involved with mental illness at a level that most folks don't have to deal with. And being a legislator, and I think I saw Mike Ball coming in. Mike, I can't remember what year back, you know, it's been kind of old, and when you got these foggy brains, you can't remember what you want to remember. But we started realizing that so many mental ill people were being mistreated by law enforcement. Not because they were really committing a crime, but because the officers didn't realize that they were mentally ill. We started a task force, and we did a lot of research, and I think we ended up with a paper trying to make sure that law enforcement was fully aware of what they were dealing with when mental illness happens. You know, so often, and I know in our smaller counties, all the mental ill people, instead of being taken to a facility for help, are put in county jails. County jails were never equipped for mentally ill patients. So we had to find some ways to actually deal with that and to get that situated. Then again, as a legislator, I serve on the general fund budget, and that's where our mental illness money is allocated. And it has disturbed me, and Commissioner Boswell can tell you, we never let her come for budget hearing without me having to make a comment. And my comment is, I cannot, as a legislator, as a citizen in the state of Alabama, justify putting $1 billion in building correctional facilities, and we don't have a long-term mental health hospital in the state. Thank you. So I will continuously fight. That's a mission that I'm on, to find a way that we can get that facility open again. I'm on my way out, but as I tell them, I might be leaving, but that's going to be a charge that I have to try to make sure we can make that complete.
Well, thank you for your efforts. Very appreciated. Chandra, we'll ask you the same question. Our Mobile, South Alabama representative. Something that struck me when I was reading about Lifeline Counseling Services was that you say that y'all have a continuum of care from crisis to skills building. I haven't seen that very many places that goes from point A to Z, for lack of a better word. So I was very impressed with that. So, but thank you for what you're doing, and we would love to hear what your biggest impact contribution is to date towards mental health improvement in our state.
So Lifelines also, our original name is Family Counseling Center. We changed it to Lifelines. We started in 1958 in Mobile. And just kind of trudged along doing work with helping everyday families with everyday problems. And then we had a couple of intersections that I think really hit, that made us, made our board, made our community stakeholders really realize that we needed to do something more. So I think the first was when the economy tanked in 2008. And then, and we saw several community members, because we have some core programs. We have our Family Counseling Center, our Rape Crisis Center, consumer credit counseling. And so we saw so many people coming in that were impacted by foreclosure. And we were like, wait, they're not just when we lose our home, as we know from disasters or as we know from personal or community disasters, then what we're going through is that emotional turmoil, right? That's what causes that's what causes a tornado that happens or a hurricane that happens to cause us to feel even more displaced, is because we lose our home. And so we were like, wait, this is an issue. And then oil spill happened in our community. We had some hurricanes, and each and every one of those just added a layer of community trauma that we really weren't talking about. And so we got a couple grants where we were really able to kind of deep dive and look at what does community trauma look like for us. And for us in Mobile, it usually happens around hurricanes. It usually happens around when we have our bad weather. Now, as our climate is changing, we're seeing it more as the heat increases. We're seeing it as when we get this thunderstorm that causes flooding. So, like, what do we do? And how do we respond to that? So we used that and connected that also with the personal crisis and trauma that people see. And I came from a perspective of like working with the Rape Crisis Center and knowing that many more folks are impacted by sexual assault. As I was excited to see the commissioner talk about ACEs, like I can geek out too. I'm like, ACEs, oh my God. And so like really, if we're not exploring how these things impact us, then do we really know where our community, and often when I say our community, I'm talking about every one of us in this room, how we are caregivers to the folks that may have even more mental health issues, right? So how do we take care of us? And that began like the continuum for when people enter and they come to us and they may just need someone to talk to. What are all the services that you need wrapped around you? So we know that you might need financial assistance. We know that you may need help with budgeting. We know that you may need food. So what are the things that we can provide? And then COVID, I think, flipped the switch for us. And it really helped us see how we can do those wraparound services in the capacities for the families that we're showing up.
Awesome, thank you. Kate, we will ask you, we know Gateway has been around and doing awesome work for a long time, but what do y'all have going on now that you consider impactful and making a difference in mental health?
Yeah, I think we're, since 1891, really, where the rubber hits the road. So in 1891, a women's sewing circle looked out and saw that there were unhoused women and children and created the Mercy Home. And we're still today with citizen-led solutions for families. So we have volunteers, one of whom is with Vulcan, that come together to be sure that we are providing safe and stable, empowering and facilitating safe and stable families for all children. And that goes from before they might need to go to foster care, to keep that family together. So like you, we operate on a continuum. We're one organization. We do this work of ensuring safe and stable families from the beginning, before the child might have to leave the home, through the children who might be returning home. If they can't live with their families, then we have therapeutic foster care. And if they fail all the gates and we fail them, we have a program for youth exiting foster care to help them with independent living skills and getting a successful start as adults. And so if you want to talk about that in relation to mental health starts with families. We came to an epiphany several years ago that we were doing a lot of work with children, and it was very well intended and very resource rich, and we thought we were improving their mental health, and we just had an epiphany that you cannot be mentally healthy as a child without a permanent family. It just can't happen. Because we are human beings, and as the Commissioner said, we are wired for connection. It's in our DNA. The very first thing we do as infants is learn to recognize a face. And any of y'all have been stopped by a baby somewhere and can't stop because they're smiling at you and you're smiling back. That's fun, but it is wired into us. It's the first thing that child is learning, and we all instinctively respond to it. So I think we're really kind of at the very ground zero with mental health, because if you don't have connections, you can't have mental health. These days, we're working very focused on child trauma. We started out by asking ourselves, why can't children succeed? We're seeing children, as Commissioner noted, being ejected from schools, preschools, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, sports teams, Sunday school. What is happening with those children? They have trauma. And we have seen this again and again with the children that we work with. We're wrapping lots of rich resources around them, providing lots of support, and yet we're not able to help them succeed. And so the first thing we did was ask ourselves, what can we do differently? And we began a partnership with New York University to train on trauma systems therapy. We've trained all of our staff throughout the whole organization. When we do something at Gateway, we do it through the whole organization. And it's been transformative. I'll tell you a little later about some of those, results that we're seeing with it. But we're really focused on equipping Alabama to respond effectively to child trauma. About 15% of Alabama children will have had 2 or more, thank you so much, Commissioner, 2 or more of those life events that you saw in that 10-question that 10-question assessment. 2 or more of those makes you vulnerable. And so we know 15% of Alabama children have had that, and some children internalize it and get shy and quiet, and we don't know why. Some are different, but some act it out. And these kids drive us nuts. They disrupt our classrooms, they disrupt our lives. They make us feel like as adults we don't know what we're doing because we can't succeed. They won't let us throw our arms around them and love them. They push us away and we can't understand why. And guess what? Neither do they. But there is a curriculum for that. There is a treatment protocol we've been following, and there is training for adults if you want to find out how to recognize it, and then how you can respond without unintentionally making it worse, which is so easy to do. And no one would do that deliberately, but we would very easily do it unintentionally. So that's what we have going on.
It's amazing work.
Thanks.
Very appreciated. Okay, before we get to results, we'll go into some challenges. Dr. Shields, what would you see as your biggest challenge in trying to address these issues?
I think my fellow panelists addressed several of the things, of course, we see in the classroom. Since over the last few years, we've certainly seen a number of behaviors that we have not traditionally seen in our classrooms, and we've got teachers that are really struggling. You know, Dr. Shields, I got, these kids, they're throwing desks in my classroom. What do you do? And we also have seen historically, I'm just going to give an example. I'm a high school teacher, and I'm 5'0", and my students were bigger and taller, and many of my students, I was teaching students who needed some systematic support. So many of them had probation officers and so forth. And traditionally in school, if a student cusses me, is belligerent, what is our typical protocol? You're out of here, right? And then the student comes back in 3 days and he's still salty. And I'm still salty, like you disrupted my class. And we have not had the reparation time. We have not had time for me to say, how can I be a better teacher to you? Because when you turn that to a student who's never heard those words from an educator, they want their learned behavior is I'm going to be belligerent, and your behavior is I get out of class. So really shifting that narrative for looking at, how if a student is skipped school, historically, how are students rewarded for that? Help me out. You get 3 days out of school suspension. So, just looking the absurdity of it, we have certainly looked inside to say, what are those restorative things that we can do? Looking at just the number of students. So, being a middle high school teacher, I engaged, and so do teachers across the state, with 160 students every single day. Every single student is coming to us with various levels of need and trauma. And we know as teachers, we can't teach our students until we know them. I heard someone say once, we as educators need to be students of our students. Don't you love that? But when you have 160 students, so just the sheer volume and just the nature of how that has changed, I would say that has been a challenge. Orchestrating supports for children who've experienced trauma, for students who have disciplinary infractions, and working with our teachers and our leaders to consider how we prepare, mitigate, and then respond to that. It's a critical piece for us to try to navigate within the Office of Student Learning, because learning falls under me, mental health falls under me, attendance, graduation rate, but would you all agree all of those things are connected? If our students were in jail the night before with their mama because she was beaten by her boyfriend, and an aunt brings him to school the next day, he has not slept, he has not eaten, he was physically abused by a boyfriend, the mother's boyfriend, and then we're like, okay, so today we're going to talk about X, Y, and Z, and I have this awesome pedagogy and these wonderful resources, and I have been AP trained in all the trainings. That child is not ready to learn. And so being able as a teacher to check the temperature of a classroom to determine this child is hurting. And I would just give one example. I was doing a training similar to this, and I am so thankful about the ACEs, because we know that it is critical that we have a fundamental understanding that a child that has 3 to 7 or 7 to 9 more ACEs is not at a place ready to learn. He or she's going to be more hyper. And I would say also, just as a matter of fact, children of trauma, we see there's multiple ways they show it. Yes, they're belligerent, right? They're trying to start a fight. They're getting in your face. But it's the quiet students, those very quiet students in our classroom that we're trying to engage. And so as educators, to be nimble in that respect, it takes a lot of consideration, but thinking about how I'm thinking of one example. I was working in Madison County. I just recently moved to Huntsville, and I was working in that system, and I was sharing some of this information, and a teacher called me, and she said, I got to tell you what happened. And it's unusual for a teacher, to reach out, but, when you come, and I always give them my number, here I am, call me, tell me what you learned from this professional learning. And she said, I just want you to know, I did what you said. I did a temperature check of my kids when they walked in the classroom. And just said, hey, if you're feeling happy, I want you to just click green, hit the little green button. If you're feeling kind of sad, I want you to hit this yellow button. If you're upset, I want you to just hit the red. And so she was able to see with her little 5-year-olds how many of her students, kind of where they felt when they walked into her classroom. It's just a temperature check, right? One little fellow walks into her classroom, and it's that I know I got a lot of teachers in this room too, but it was that kid we all love in the classroom. Darcy Shields, can I do this for you? You look so pretty today. I mean, they're just all kinds of words of affirmation. That child walked in and hit red. And she said to him, come here, baby, what's going on? And he said, well, my grandma, she's in the hospital. Oh my goodness, we're going to pray for her. Thank you for letting me know. She checked on this little fella several times through the day. The grandmother calls from the hospital to check on her grandson. And the teacher says, well, how are you doing? And the grandmother says, well, how did you know I was sick? And she says, well, I started this new thing today, and he marked red. And the grandmother said, he didn't mark red because I'm in the hospital. He marked red because he doesn't want to go home where my daughter's boyfriend has been sexually abusing him. That was the very first day of her doing this. So that is just one example that just comes to mind when we talk about the challenges. I don't want to step on the toes because I know my friends are going to discuss secondary trauma. Imagine being this 24-year-old teacher who doesn't even have children herself, experiencing that conversation and knowing she's got to walk back into that classroom with this little friend that just wants someone to love him. So I would say the secondary piece to that, the trauma piece, is certainly something we teachers engage with every single day.
And is there training for these teachers?
As a matter of fact, yes, and we work in concert, and I know, I'm trying not to say things that I know my friends are going to say. We work with the Department of Mental Health. We do a ton of this work through our multi-tiered systems of supports. We recognize and we say to teachers, things are going to happen and you're going to take it home. You're not going to be able to sleep at night knowing what your children are going home to. And what we had one school do to respond to that, it didn't cost a penny. This gentleman, he had 712 high school, had about 500 kids, a lot of multilingual students, a lot of students in poverty. And he put a student's name on every single locker. And he lined every single adult that works at this school, whether it's a bus driver, whether it's someone works in the library, in the lunchroom, that is a custodian, and said, okay, the kids are out here, I'm going to play some fun music, grab you a pen, and if you know this child's name, there's 500 names just up and down the hall. If you know this child's name, I want you to write your name. You dated his mama. It happens. I taught in a small school. When he said, where's Rainsville? I'm like, Hope's Bluff. I know where Rainsville is. If you go to church together, if his aunt cuts your hair, if you know this child, write your name. So the teachers did that, and the administrators, and the bus drivers, and everybody else that encountered kids all day long. Because a child may probably see, 25 adult faces in the course of a day, right? And we want to make sure that this child has someone. And so for every blank sheet, now the teacher's kids, I had TKs because I taught my own children. So the teacher's kids, there's lots of names. This principal, and this is a protocol that is done across our state. This principal pulled every single blank sheet and said, this baby comes to our class. Now I'm a high school person, to me 17-year-olds are babies. I'm always going to call them my kids. This child, when he comes to school, he doesn't have a person to say this happened to me. No one knows his birthday. No one knows where he lives. No one knows what games he plays. And he divvied these up. And he said, all right, here's your 4 kids. Here's your 4 kids. Every adult at that school, this is your person. And when they've been out 4 days, I don't want the first thing they hear is, you want to help me? Where's your excuse? We want someone to say, oh my gosh, we've missed you. How you doing? How's your grandma? Do I have to tell you what happens to attendance and discipline in a school like that? And the teachers the next year say, I want that same kid, you know, because when I go to Walmart, he's like, this is Mr. So-and-so, he's the custodian at my school. So when you ask about challenges, this is part of being a teacher. This is an accomplished teacher knows we have to be nimble, but it is a lot of strain, a lot of bandwidth, and a lot of taking it home.
Thank you. I think a lot that goes along with that too is we can't expect our teachers to do it all. And I think that a lot of the peer-to-peer school-based programming is becoming very important, that we can teach our children to be there for each other. As Commissioner spoke about, connectivity is so important, and I know that's what we're working really hard to build in schools and elsewhere. Jeremy.
So traditionally, I would say that the challenges of Community Mental Health Center is meeting the demand. There's always been, we have always been almost counter to the supply and demand laws, meaning that we have way more demand than we have supply for. It's always been a challenge to hire and retain good quality personnel, and that's because we traditionally have not paid very well. And so that has really always been one of the biggest challenges. But I will say that is beginning to shift with our crisis care, with our CCBHC. So really, I would say going forward, the biggest challenge, and I'm reminded from a scene from, I'll date myself, but the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson. There's a real powerful scene in that movie where they're about to go into one of the final battles, and Mel Gibson's character has just lost his eldest son, who was killed in battle. And his great friend, one of the generals, comes to him and says, his character's name, whatever, but Mel, we need you. And Mel basically says, I'm done. I've done everything I can do. And the general's response is, stay with us, stay the course. I really feel like now we're at a point where we need legislators, both state and federal, to stay with us and stay the course. For the first time in 50 years, we have a comprehensive plan for community mental health, meaning CCBHC, meaning the civil commitment bed plan that the commissioner talked about, with adding 150 plus beds over the next 5 years. We are seeing all of these pieces begin to finally come together and to see the impact that that has. But we know that all of that could potentially change with new administration, no matter if it's state or federal. And so how do we continue, through your support, through others, to stay that course, to make sure that the gains that we've made over the last 5 years, we don't lose? Because back to the history of community mental health funding, if we lose it, I don't know when we're going to get it back. And if it's another 20 to 30 years, we're going to be back in this forum talking about these same things because we didn't take the opportunity to stay the course. And so that is really my biggest challenge, I feel like, at this point. We still have staffing challenges. We still need more qualified individuals, but that's going to take time. When you have a system that traditionally paid so poorly for so long, there's not a lot of college graduates that are raising their hand saying, I want to go into mental health. So we're going to have to change that over time. That will definitely take effort to fill all of these positions. You know, we run probably a 20% vacancy rate in our staffing, but maybe I'm optimist, maybe I'm delusional, but I feel like we are really making those changes. We're expanding services like we've never expanded before. We're able to go into school systems that we haven't been in before. We're able to provide gaps in services. I sent an email to our stakeholders saying, hey, what do we need to do better, and where are the gaps that you see as the mayor, the county commission chairman, the chief of police, the sheriff? The only reason why I can do that, I've never been able to do that in 25 years, because if somebody said, well, what about this? Well, then I got to go figure out how to get it funded. With the mechanisms now that we have now, there are some different levers to pull to be able to fill those gaps. So that's exciting. That's really, I really feel like we're going, but I lived through the cuts of 2010, so I have a little trauma myself in that, is that my cue to stop? In that I feel like the rug could be pulled out from under us at any point. And so I hope that's not the case. I really hope we stay the course and we make sure that the gains that we've made over the last 5 years, that we build on those. Because we only have 2 mental health centers right now in CCBHC, us and one other. I can't wait for the day when all of the mental health centers are within that model and the change and the impact it has on this state. I promise you it will blow your mind of what we're able to do. So,
Quick question,
sure,
quick answer.
I'll try.
But y'all have, recently, you're the only crisis center that's expanded your services to children and adolescents in crisis center. Can you give us a quick update on how that's going?
Sure.
Would you see that as replicable?
Absolutely. You know, I think we opened in October of 24, or September, end of September 24. Our first full month operating was October. In October, we admitted 20 kids. February, which is a short month, we admitted 50 kids. So we got it right in that the demand was there, because that will just continue to grow. The concerning part of those numbers is 80% of those kids that were admitted had either anxiety or suicidality, to the point where they needed a break or needed hospitalization. Our kids are hurting and they need us. And so for us, we did not have any inpatient or crisis option in Madison County, which is why we pushed for a crisis center for kids. And so, but the beauty of it is these kids come in for 3 days, 4 days, and then we wrap them with other services, whether it's our own services or somebody else's, and get them back out. So they are not losing a ton of school time. They are able to come in, get stabilized, and then follow up. That is our big thing, is we don't want long-term. We want to get our kids in, we want to stabilize them, whether it's adjust their medications or meet with their families and figure out what all is going on, and then move them on. But the crisis center wouldn't be possible without, obviously, funding, but also the rest of the continuum of care. Part of that is our mobile crisis teams. We get a lot of kids that are coming through with our mobile crisis teams. So the pieces that we continue to put in place are critical to the entire picture. So you can't just plop one thing in and say, oh, that's the magic bullet. It's putting all of these pieces in place. Is that short enough?
Yes, thank you very much. Representative Warren, I know that you're involved in introducing a bill into the legislature for removal of cell phones in schools. Could you give us an update on that and where you see this headed?
This little baby right here has taken over in our classrooms and our educational system. More than 50% of students get over 237 notifications per day. Students spend an average of 90 minutes on their phones during the school day. And it takes 23 minutes and 15 seconds to refocus after this distraction. So what's happening now? Kids are not learning anymore. You go in a classroom and you discover that they're playing games with each other in the classroom. They are writing bad texts about each other, which basically causes a disturbance or some fight or something by the time the class is over. They're sitting in classrooms listening at music. They're sitting in classrooms sending texts. And we're seeing in a lot of situations, and this is the bad part about it, parents are texting kids during class days. this is, how do you expect for Alabama to move ahead when you got a classroom of folks that are totally removed from the educational curriculums? This cannot happen. My daughter, who teaches 11th grade English in the state of Texas, started telling me, she said, you know, things are changing now. I said, why are they changing now? She said, we've restricted the use of cell phones in the classroom. I said, is it working? What kind of resentment? She said, Mama, you know me and my kids, they're going to love me and they're going to do exactly what I tell them to do. She said, but you know, we hadn't had any problems when they come in. As a matter of fact, she videoed it. When they walk in, they put their phones in the little box thing she has there, and they go and they sit. But the thing that really got her was that she got a call from a parent and said that she needed to talk to her about her daughter. And she said, oh, Lord, what this girl done told her mama now, what's going on? And she said she talked to the parent, and she said, I need to know what's happening in your class. She said, well, we're trying to teach English, and she explained what was going on. She said, no. She said, something else is happening. She said, I've heard my daughter come home, get on the phone, talk to her friends about projects in your class, about what happened in your class. She said, this has never happened before. She said, my kid never had an interest into what's going on in a classroom. And she said, well, the only thing I can tell you, she doesn't have time to play on her phone anymore. And she said, it has made that much of a difference? And she says, yes, because she has time to now get her classroom work. And she said, one day, they finished early, about 10 minutes early, and she said, I'm going to let y'all do something. I'm going to let you have your phones. And she said, when they got those phones, it's like they left this world and went to a total new world. She said, you couldn't hear a sound. And then she realized, she said, Mama, this is really killing these kids. She said, once they get those phones, it's like the world is right here. You can't communicate. And, you know, and I start looking and dealing with things, and I start noticing not only kids, but I start noticing adults. If take time to go to a restaurant where people are eating, and they're sitting at the table, and they might say hey to each other, but from that point on, when they make their order, they talk. From that point on, everybody at that table is this right here. No communication. Our kids are losing their communication skills. So we got to do something. So what I decided to do, I introduced the bill, House Bill 81. We have about 2 other bills that have been introduced now to restrict the use of cell phones in our schools. And this is where one of the bills came up on the floor this week. And what we got to do, we got to find a way to come together and compromise how this is going to work. Now, with my bill, I'm only restricting the use of cell phones during instructional time. When they're in the hallway, when they're outside, whatever they want to do, they can do that. But while they're in classrooms, they're going to have to not utilize the cell phone. Another bill that we had up on this week really restricted the students from having cell phones on the grounds of the school. And, you know, that was really going to send those parents over the wind, you know, because they feel as though their kid has to have a phone with them all the time. My thing is, I said, if it's serious, we got to let students know it's serious. So I wanted some disciplinary rulings in my bill. And so we are now in the process of trying to compromise to come up with a good bill. And one of the things the parents are saying is that in case of an emergency, how are they going to let us know and call? And I'm gonna be honest with you, anybody at my age, you know, we did real good in school. When mama or daddy needed to talk to you, they called the principal's office. That was it. We didn't have no other communication. So when the incident happened in Georgia, if you notice, they had purchased a system, and everybody was aware of what was going on at the time, where you were, what you're doing, the whole thing. It was great. As a matter of fact, I took the name of the system down. I took the makers of the name of the system down. I just have not been able yet to get the cost as to what this system is. And I don't see a problem with, if there's an emergency, a blast, a school blast, go to all the parents, even to the parents whose kids don't have a cell phone. So what is trying to become a complicated issue is one that really needs to be resolved in our classrooms if we really want our kids to be educated. Because like I said, when you see what's going on, and you go to an assembly, and if you hadn't looked at it, look at it. If you go to an assembly with kids, you got to meet a guest speaker. No, they're not paying any attention to that guest speaker. They're doing this. I mean, and it's totally ignoring what's going on. And I think that in Alabama, they're saying that they can't find a student. I said, okay, if you can't find a student, you can't find it because it's not in law. If we pass a bill and say you can find them, you can find them. Because I said you can take the resources for a fine, put it into an account for student activities, utilize it for the students. If not, the students can do community service. Our kids got to understand that there's some penalty, some discipline for their actions. Because, you know, right now you look at our kids and everything they feel as though they're forgiven because they're juveniles. So as we are looking at this bill and concentrating on it, I'm just hoping and praying, and the governor really wants a cell phone restriction. The key is how we're going to put it in place and how we're going to deal with it. Because, see, right now, the State Board of Education can direct a school to do something, but it's not in law. So, I mean, they really don't do it. And there are some schools now in Alabama with cell phone restrictions, and they're working well. And there are other schools that have totally disregarded, and they see these kids just having a ball. I mean, like I say, the fights are ridiculous because some of the things that these kids are putting on, and when you look at what's happening to the kids' development, I don't know, I've never been on TikTok, where TikTok is, but these kids are just believing everything that they read on TikTok. You had a student to kill her best friend because TikTok told her they got to get rid of her.
Representative Warren, I'm going to have to move on.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I'm accustomed to being timed for 10 minutes. I'm sorry. The speaker will let me know in 10 minutes it's time to shut up.
We didn't set a buzzer, but know how much we very much appreciate your efforts and support the work that's being done to get this done in the state legislature. So we very much appreciate it. Okay. Chandra and Kate, I'm going to give each of you a quick chance to maybe share the results of what you're seeing in your programming. Chandra?
I can say in a quick story, I think during COVID, we had a young lady that came to us. She had been seeing us because of some domestic violence issues, came back because she received a grant, and so what she wanted to do, so we set up so that she can, we were a payor for her grant, so the grant was to help her with anything that she had related to school. So with that, we created a plan with her, and we said, all right, we will have you go to counseling, you know, once a week. We will have you go to consumer credit counseling to help you with your bills. Anytime she needed anything for school, we were able to give her that money. So she needed help with tires, we could help with that. She needed help with rent, we could help with that. She needed help with books, we could do that. At the end of her year and a half with us, she going through the process, helping with all the things. We had someone that helped her with resume skills, with all the different things that we could wrap around her. At the end of that, we, and this was a bright moment during COVID, she sent us a picture in her graduation outfit with the balloon. She became an RN. And so to think that someone who left a violent situation with her and her kids, who went from pretty much homelessness to now changing the trajectory of her life, like that's the work that we're doing to embed in our community members. So yeah, thank you.
That's awesome, thank you. Kate, before we turn it over to all the questions that may be coming, we'll let you have one last say.
This is our why, right?
Yes, this is our this is like, yes,
why we
this
do
is
what
why
we
we
do.
this.
So I'll give you an example too from trauma systems treatment, which is new for us. We had a young man come into our care who had been in care for 10 years, meaning he had been in a lot of different places. And he had a list of diagnoses as long as your arm. I mean, if there was a diagnosis, he had it and the medication to go with it. And he came into us, and the first thing he did was blow out of the first placement we put him in. And so we said, okay, we're going to have to try to do something different. We got him with a foster family who was very committed to him, and we implemented this trauma systems treatment protocol. We use a multidisciplinary team to do that. It has psychiatrists, has an attorney, has our staff, the therapist, has our staff, the worker, and an educational specialist who works with the school issues. And we worked with this kid for 2 years through that protocol. And he was able to go all the way through the process. He came to understand what it was in the environment that would set him off. He had no clue. And the adults certainly don't have any clue, but he was able to learn that. And since he was able to learn that, he was able to change his behavior. And he's now like living the life of a normal teenager. He's thinking about college. He just passed his driver's license on his first try. But the biggest thing to really like before and after picture, zillions of diagnoses, right? Every medication under the sun. He just had a complete reevaluation. Guess how many diagnoses? One. And not even a severe form of that. He has a mild form of autism. We couldn't get a good picture of this young person because his trauma behavior was all we could see. Yeah, wow. It's really a privilege to get to do this. We've got lots of other stories we could tell you, but this was one I wanted to bring today. This really does work. If you use an approach that is based in brain science, that understands child development, and that is aimed at the child's system, meaning the adults, as well as the child, this really can work. So thanks for asking the success question. I would rather have answered that than the challenge question.
Glad I switched gears. No, I think it's a wonderful example of, I mean, it takes a village to raise children, and it takes all of us to save even just one, and each one matters. And that's what we're all working towards in this room for children and adults who are suffering from these issues. So we are down to some final minutes, which we would love to open up to your questions and hope to have your participation in answering questions. We have some PARCA volunteers here who, if you raise your hand, they will bring you a microphone and you will be ready to go.
I'm Susan Beatty Pierce with National Alliance Mental Illness Birmingham, president, and I was born and raised in Birmingham, and I have worked 40 years to see this today, to see what that woman has done, what our legislature has done, what families have done, the grassroots movement. We're 501c3. We're all volunteers. We don't get paid. But what is done here today with PARCA, thank you. Thank you, thank you. We need one of these every year at some place, somewhere. I know there's a lot of elected officials here, but cities, counties, states, it's not just the state and federal government. The cities and the counties, and we have my representative here today, and hopefully the next mayor of Chelsea here, but we lost 4 kids in Chelsea. I live in Shelby County now, due to suicide in an 18-month period, and it haunts us every day. I have been hearing these stories for 40 years, working for 4 state agencies. I'm just a sister, I'm nobody. I'm just a sister that everything could have been avoided if we'd have had all this in place 40 years ago. But we're here now. And a new day's coming. And we're going to Washington, and we're going to the state, and we're going to keep going thanks to these people here that are with me today in our 2 tables, and this wonderful man called Wayne Rogers, who has a spirit for Jefferson County to be better than it is. Thank you for doing what you do. I'm here for you. Anything I can do for PARCA, we are here for you. We are partners. This coming September the 20th, we are having a walk, and we are launching with the department this Mental Health Matters license plate. Anyone that is willing to come and donate money to this, the people that can't afford it, they want to put it on their car, that would be wonderful. But we are honoring our hospitals this year. Please, please come and support our hospitals. They just went through a major change. We cannot lose any more hospitals in this state. I'll say it again. We cannot lose any more hospitals or caregivers in this state. Thank you for all you're doing. Thank you, PARCA. I'm shutting up now. Thank you, sir. But thank you so much for having this year.
Hi, my name is Dominique Cecil. I'm CEO of Yellowbird Counseling. I heard the word connection come up a lot from the speakers, and I wanted to know, what are we doing to address the cultural competency with our mental health workers and our other supporters in school systems in order to build that connection? For any of you that know the statistics, 96% of the mental health profession is guided by non-Black people. So if we're having that type of disparity with a population in Alabama of about 30% BIPOC people to only 7% BIPOC professionals, what are we doing to increase the cultural competency for the 93% of mental health professionals that don't look like me? What are we doing to build that connection with those BIPOC children in the school?
Anyone want to take that one on briefly?
I can jump in there. So, of course, our schools look different across the state. Even within a district, sometimes they can look vastly different from one another. So we have this, you know, Dr. Mackey has just been an amazing leader to work with. Our motto is every child, every chance, every day. And that says everything. And so to respond to your question, and my work prior to moving into this role as the assistant, I spent much of my time working in our urban, very rural, very high poverty schools. And one of the things to address your comment is there was a conversation with one of our African American superintendents working in a largely African American school district. And he said, Melissa, I just want to tell you, my community, we do not talk about mental health. And I said, well, what can we do? Well, how can we change that trajectory? And that was really important for us to have this fundamental conversation about, well, you know, just the cultural piece of that. And how, you know, and I think that's a Southern thing to some degree. You know, we all talk about our crazy Uncle Bob, you know, but, you know, then we really start talking about mental health and what that means. So in our schools, making sure that the conversations we're having, making sure those professional learnings are very centric to the very nature of what makes that student a learner in our schools. I could not agree with you more, and thank you for bringing that up, that we have to broaden that scope. Because our students, and it is connectedness, I'm just going to reiterate that. If we've said anything here, it is the importance of being relational from that time that baby opens its eyes and enters that classroom and then goes into the workforce and then hopefully does really wonderful things. So I appreciate the question. I want you to know from an education standpoint, that is a conversation that has been evolving and making sure that we are being nimble and responsive to that call for action. Thank you.
And I do think it's being, go ahead, Chandra.
If I can add, like, for us, it became, you can't talk about trauma without talking about cultural competency, because they're varying different levels of trauma as relate to cultural competency, historical trauma being one of them. And so it was really, really important for us to kind of dig down and understand all the levels that we needed to address. And as an agency, that's kind of what we doubled down on, is what is it that we're looking at, and what is it that we're looking at when we address our community, knowing that our BIPOC community members probably are more likely to experience traumas in a different way, and knowing how to respond to that and understand that. Something that just came to my attention that's heart-wrenching is that when you disaggregate the data upon race with kids who are suicidal, Black kids have surpassed any other racial group within the past 5 years. And so it's like, oh, wait, we have a problem. You know, and we're also walking into a community that historically we don't deal with mental health, because dealing with mental health is a level of privilege. Processing my feelings are a level of privilege, and if I'm surviving, I don't have space for that, right? So I think it's important for us to kind of level set and communicate that trauma impacts different communities in different ways, and being able to respond to that.
Thank you.
Hi there.
Okay,
Sorry. My name's Graham Smith, and I serve on the Mountain Brook City Council. Thank you for this today. I learned about a program recently, I see some familiar faces, called Handle with Care, that I believe is involved in Madison County, but it's not statewide. And it's cost neutral, no charge. And what it is that, maybe you can touch upon it, it's if a child experiences trauma, basically the police or EMS come to their house, that the police then can just take their name and notify that school. It doesn't say what happened to the child, so that they, witnessed a assault, or it could just be something benign like their grandparent having a heart attack. But they notify the school, maybe the principal and the counselor, just handle with care, kind of like the red, green. Is that something that we could roll out throughout the state? I mean, I'd be interested in seeing that in the county.
So that's not our program, but that's the National Child Advocacy Center that's based in Huntsville. They have a grant, so that's where they've started. I think their goal is to take that statewide at some point. So that's about the extent of my knowledge on that. But from what I understand, I think it started in Madison City Schools, but it's been a really powerful program.
One more question?
This is actually not a question, it's a comment. For those of you who know me, another Susan from NAMI, Susan Salad. But in addition to being a member of NAMI for 15 years and a mother with 35 plus years of lived experience with mental health, I've been working for the JBS Mental Health Authority for 4 years. I work in the first episode psychosis program. I want to give a shout out to the understanding of the use of the program of the interdisciplinary team. Anybody with any kind of mental health condition will be profoundly benefited by having the opportunity to work with an interdisciplinary team. On that team, my role is parent-peer. Because of my years of experience, I can help parents understand and function better and knowledgeably. And we talked about the need for community. We need to support the family.
Thank you. Okay, one question that does keep coming up, that was submitted to us as well, but it's kind of asking each of you, and we'll just give an overall answer, but it keeps coming up as to what, as an individual or a voter, or an employer, can we do as individuals to make a difference? So this has to be super quick and super thoughtful, but if anybody has any thoughts, we would love to hear it, because everyone keeps asking this question, and then we will wrap it up.
I think first, learn about trauma. If that was one takeaway from today, like trauma impacts your lives in so many ways and we don't recognize it and realize it. So if that's something that you can do, I mean, if you can shift your thinking to like, what is it in Trauma 101? What's wrong with you to what happened to you? You know, to really being present and understanding what another person's walk is, and not just children. Yes, they are important. They are our future, as Whitney Houston said, but also like, what with our employees, with the people that we work with, like what are we going through? Work can't just be work anymore. We really have to understand and set place for where people are emotionally when they show up.
And may I just piggyback on that, that Gateway right now has the resources to do free training for informing adults on how to recognize and respond to child trauma. So you can reach out to us if you'd like to arrange that for your workplace, if you'd like to arrange it for your your organization. We are funded on 2 federal grants that we can provide that training right now. So I would have given the same answer.
And I would just say, one, to continue that, talk about it. It's really that simple. It's been amazing to see the trajectory of things change since COVID and our willingness to talk about mental health, our willingness to talk about trauma. The more we have these kind of conversations in different forums, in your non-traditional forums, I would say, the business community, the research community, whatever it may be, the more that we have those conversations, the more we normalize mental health. And people will have the ability to just be themselves.
Well, to make it simple, put the money where the needs are.
That was so well done. That's very impressive. Well, we thank you all for being here. We hope you found this to be informative and challenging. I think our next speaker is going to tell us where we go from here, but we hope that this will be a first step from taking it from a conversation into further action. So thank y'all so much, and thank you to our panelists for all being here.
I'm going to use executive privilege and ask 2 quick questions that need quick answers. So can you tell us, can you share anything about any initiatives to proactively engage the faith community to help reduce stigma?
Do you want me to answer as a
somebody.
Once again, and when you're a teacher, and I grew up in a rural area, it has always been all in. So that question, the reason I paused is because that is just a natural, piece of that work is, especially in our smaller communities, there is not a business and an industry. It is our faith-based organizations, our churches, those that have the heart to help. They were like, they're making sure that our kids have backpack lunches. They're making sure they are working with our after-school programs. So it is just not to beat a dead horse here, but it is just to continue that communication. What I find as a teacher and as a school and district and now state leader is sometimes folks want to be in our space, they just don't know how to get there, or they feel that there's a barrier. And so I see my friends from United Way of Central Alabama, they are a great model. I've worked with them where we sat in a room and we had every single mental health provider, a representative from every scope of that work sitting in a room together saying, all right, how can we be solution seekers for kids? That certainly includes our faith-based organizations as well.
And also, they're doing just specific mental health first aid trainings for churches, for youth leaders, that's all involved, and that's a whole curriculum just for them. And also some of the school-based programming, such as Hope Squads, such as different schools that very much involve the entire community, which includes the faith-based. So.
Second question, very quick answer. We've talked a lot about state policy, but as Susan mentioned a minute ago, we have a lot of local leadership. What are opportunities for city and county leaders in this space?
We have.
Well, I was going to say just what you said, like bringing the community, bringing the agencies together. They can convene us in a way to hear like what's going on and what's needed.
And also to engage their school boards, which is so important. Many times the schools are interested, or the governments are interested, but you hit the school boards and kind of you can run into some issues.
But I also want to kind of talk about just real quickly on crisis intervention training. as well as co-responders. So we pair master's level clinicians with HPD officers. And I will say, in terms of results, since we've had crisis intervention training throughout our HPD force, as well as our co-responders and our mobile crisis teams and our crisis centers, we have not had a fatal encounter with law enforcement and somebody had a mental health crisis since 2020.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, panelists.